Welcome to Daily Office Devotions, where every Monday through Friday we explore that day's scripture readings as given in the Book of Common Prayer. I'm Reggie Kidd. Thanks for joining me this Monday in the 5th week after the Epiphany, in year 2 of the Daily Office readings. Today's New Testament readings provide subtle but powerful insights into Christ's identity and into his ministry among us. In John chapter 7, Jesus claims that he has come to fulfill the prophecies that streams of water would come gushing forth from God's temple to bless the earth. Ezekiel chapter 47, verses 1 through 12, Joel chapter 3, verse 18, and Zechariah chapter 14, verse 8. Jesus has already said that he will be building a new temple from his own body, John chapter 2, verses 19 through 22. And now he offers a word about the life that will emanate from that new temple. Part of the beautiful symbolism of the Feast of Tabernacles was a pouring out of water on the altar of Jerusalem's temple each morning of the week-long festival. The symbol reminded God's people of Zechariah's promise that in the last days living water shall flow out from Jerusalem, half of them to the eastern sea and half of them to the western sea. It shall continue in summer as in winter, and the Lord will become king over all the earth. On that day the Lord will be one and his name one. Zechariah chapter 14, verses 8 through 9. On the last day of the feast, Jesus stands up in front of everybody assembled and shouts out, yes, really, he shouts it out, "If anyone is thirsty, let them come to me." John chapter 7, verse 37a. Most translations, including the New Revised Standard Version, treat the rest of what Jesus shouts as promising that water would then flow from believers' hearts. However, it's not clear how the Greek should be punctuated. There was no punctuation in the originals. Along with a number of influential commentators, I think that the rest of what Jesus shouts is, "And let the one who believes in me drink," just as the scripture says, "From within him," by which Jesus means himself, "will flow rivers of living water." John chapter 7, verses 37b through 38. John explains that Jesus is talking about the Spirit that had not yet been given. On the cross, water and blood will flow from his side. John chapter 19, verse 34. After his resurrection, the Spirit will flow from him to the apostles and the church. John chapter 14, verse 16, and chapter 20, verse 22. In other words, first the living water flows from Jesus, King over all the earth, and then the living water flows from him into and through us by the Spirit to the world that he has come to reclaim, bless, and renew. Admittedly, we are in the deep end of the pool, but what a pool. In Hebrews chapter 13, the writer provides the fourth of 4 ways in which Jesus acts as high priest in the line of Melchizedek and as our worship leader in the heavenly sanctuary. Hebrews has already recounted how Jesus declares the Father's name in our worship, leads song when we assemble, and ever lives to intercede for those he has cleansed by his sacrificial death. Hebrews chapter 8, verses 1 through 2, chapter 2, verse 12, and chapter 7, verse 25. Now in Hebrews chapter 13, the writer shows how Genesis chapter 14's Melchizedek foreshadowed Jesus as priest when he brought bread and wine to Abraham and received in return a tithe of the spoils of Abraham's victory. Genesis chapter 14 and Hebrews chapter 7. We have an altar from which those who officiate in the tent have no right to eat, says the writer. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 10. As he does so, he invites us to go outside the provincial camp of the earthly temple's rites in Jerusalem. He invites us instead to partake of fellowship with Jesus, who suffered outside the city gate. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 12. Ancient readers of this text, and rightly, I think, understood the writer to be inviting us to recall Melchizedek, Gentile priest and king of Jerusalem, the very city outside of which God's Messiah was to be crucified. Melchizedek had come outside that city to bless Abraham and to offer him bread and wine. Genesis chapter 14, verses 18 through 20. As in Paul's writings, where promise precedes and takes precedence over law, Here in Hebrews, the church's bread and wine for everybody precedes and takes precedence over the temple's sin offerings that were consumed by Levitical priests only. Leviticus chapter 6, verse 26. As our great high priest after the order of Melchizedek, Jesus brings us bread and wine from God's holy altar. He does so week after week, and he will do so until that time when at the end of time, he will host us at the great feast that ushers in the age to come. Isaiah chapter 25, verses 6 through 8, and Luke chapter 12, verse 37. Here in Hebrews chapter 13, instead of tithes from victorious Abraham, our heavenly Melchizedek receives the twofold offering of, one, a sacrifice of praise to God, that is the fruit of lips that confess his name, and two, the doing of good and in the living of lives of koinonia, a rich New Testament word that denotes intimate fellowship, generosity, and sharing with one another. See Acts chapter 2, verse 42, Romans chapter 12, verse 13, and chapter 15, verses 26 through 27, and elsewhere. The first part of Hebrews chapter 13 offers a beautiful catalog of what such a life of koinonia looks like. Hospitality, care for prisoners, honoring marital and sexual boundaries, freedom from a greed that would inhibit generosity, the sharing of community-building sound teaching rather than community-destroying strange teaching. Hebrews chapter 13, verses 1 through 9. Praise be, the new Melchizedek leads us in worship services, that is what we come in from the world to do on Sundays, and in service that is worship, that is what we go out into the world to do on Monday through Saturday. Be blessed this day.